Hello and welcome back. I'm aronmsound, and this is the show Look Up, where I interject myself into conversations that not a single person in this world invited me into. Truth. And I try to take them someplace maybe they weren't intended to go, so that you and I can take a journey beyond the prisons of our mentality, limited by the concepts of our peer pressure relationships. In other words, I say look up at the elephants in the room, standing on top of the glass ceiling that we can just smash with our own minds. Smash right on through them. But we have to stand outside of our prison cells. And today, folks, I get dragged right on back in. Right on back in, just when you thought you were on your way out. I am gonna today react to some Dr. Quantum, which I think helps drag out, draw clearly, illuminates my concepts about perception, about presentation, about how there are more nuances and dimensions to than just this dating manosphere, the 6'4" hamster in a big giant plastic ball in a Miami lounge suit, picking up on all of your ex-girlfriends. There's more to it. There's a nuance. There's a large conversation happening here. And if I don't have it in a silly way, people might think that I'm trying to change the world or something. Goodness gracious me, don't think that at all. Not me. I stay out of that fight. Today, like I said, I'm going to drawn back into the pearly motherfucking verse. Yeah, that's right. The pearly Mickey frickin' verse. The pearly verse. And the title of this one is called They Couldn't Handle the Truth. They couldn't handle the truth. And I think that's a projection. Although it is. What great clickbait. Goodness, just clicky, clicky, clicky. It made me go clicky, clicky. Truthfully. But then again, I just like to talk to y'all about all of these little prisons that we build for ourselves, and then we throw our monkey poo out of our prison into the other prison, and they're like, my monkey poo smells better than your monkey poo. Although I don't believe many of these people believe in evolution. I think that they're avoiding it and ignoring it. And that's just my personal HO. But then again, because we all have an A and an O, not everybody gets the O, though, and I'm going to talk about this. Hopefully I'll get far enough into the video to talk about the lack of O in somebody's face. As you get older, you can kind of see people that are in touch with themselves, and you can like smell it and see it. Smell it. You can really smell those people that are in touch with themselves. No, it's like a sense. You could tell whether or not that person is on a similar experience level. You can tell because it kind of comes off of us in this emanation, an aura, a sense of, it's in your eyes, it's in your body language. How comfortable are you with you? And a lot of times, it has to do with how well you know yourself. And that is not just in your mind or your spiritual sense. That's also your body, folks. How well do you know your body? And I know plenty of athletes that don't know schmack about their own body. They just know it is an instrument to run. And they don't know that it has many levels and layers. Yes, it has many levels and many layers. So don't be fooled, because you too can pull the wool right on over your own eyes, folks. I'll say it again. You too can pull the wool right on over your own eyes. Okay? So today's episode featuring the Pearrrrrrrrl, that limited world in which everything is 1955 And that's the only way we can possibly achieve happiness, is by doing those things that Pearl thinks her parents are doing. Pretty much. If you want me to boil it down to the meanest possible logistical, obvious answer from a perspective point of view, it's because Pearl thinks everybody should be doing what her parents are doing because it seems to work for them, not knowing that it only works in that one little environment, because you couldn't uproot that family and put it into San Francisco and have made that work. Nope. You couldn't have taken it to New York and made that work. Nope. You wouldn't even have been able to take it to some places in many places in the world. No, it only works in a certain environment with a certain support system. And that support system can be considered privilege. Because when you have one, it is a privilege. And if you don't recognize it, well, then what does it become? Not only privilege, but you think you're, what's the word, folks? Come on, kids. Say it with me. Entitled. Yes. Yeah, you become entitled to it and you don't even realize it. And that's really what entitled is. When you don't realize that you think something belongs to you, when it in fact is not nominally belonging to anybody. Just like how safety isn't, you can't be entitled to safety because we could all be wiped out by a solar flare in a blink of an eye. Accidentally have a latrine full of frozen blue ice land on you inside of your own home. It's happened, folks. Look it up. That's what happens in a universe where randomness is a portion of the reality. And if you don't like it, let me ASMR you into weirdness. Scratchy, scratchy. It makes me wonder, do you know where you live and where you're from? Or are you believing the constructs of an ancient time, of another time that keeps us all just like at bay from being able to be our happiest of selves? And what is our happiest of self? The pursuit and the actuation, the actualization, the becoming of what we wish to be, whatever that is. There are 8 billion of us now on a planet that can sustain 20 billion people, believe it or not. If, that is, we act more in balance with our surroundings. And there isn't a certain small set of people hoarding from the rest, saying to the rest, oh, it's for your better. We know what to do with it. All that stuff that you're experiencing in scarcity, pay no attention. I know we have the most of it, but we're not manufacturing that scarcity. Which brings me to this conversation. They couldn't handle the truth. Let's start with the scarcity of comfort, the scarcity of loyalty, the scarcity of consensus about well-being. That's manufactured because we actually have all that. We all know that happiness comes from what makes us individually feel happy. And then the extremists would argue, oh, but that means you could be crazy and kill people. What if that makes you happy? No, okay. That's not a logical argument. Now you're jumping to conclusions, or you want me to grab out the mat and we can spin the wheel and you can act in fear. That's not a realistic portion of the conversation. That's a red herring that takes us off. And I don't take part in those conversations because it just pulls away from what we're trying to have. It's, when I say a red herring, it's like a spy walking into the room and seeing that you're getting too close to the actual end of the conversation. So let me throw some flim-flam magic in there so you look the other direction. And that's the big problem. The big problem in this whole discussion and in our back and forth in the Western world. We let the magicians walk in and raid our pockets, raid our spiritual selves, raid our whole ability to look beyond the petty conversations. When we let them steal the moments and sell us on a bill of goods so they, whoever they be, and I'll say whoever for the moment, although I wouldn't even pose it if I didn't actually know the answers. I'll say this again, I wouldn't pose it if I didn't actually know the answers. And I'm not going to let planet Earth, humanity, down by knowing the answers and not saying something about it. That we have the ability, all of us, every single one of us, to enjoy our lives, our experiences, and to make the most out of it, and to take the entirety of the species up another chain, actually gain a greater being, something that is greater, not a petty sense of greater, but an actual greater in the evolutionary scale of ourselves. And that next step is an egalitarianism that makes it a bad thing to hoard, that shuns that version of monkey boy, of monkey person, and weeds it out of our genetics altogether. Because those practices are social and they're genetic. But I digress 100% because they couldn't handle the truth when it's true that it's Pearrrrrrrr's projection. In this case, and the reason I'm using this video today, as I'm 10 minutes into my own video, is to say, hey, check out how quickly they hit a ceiling in a conversation that is actually going somewhere. That as soon as they get to a point where they can solve something socially and culturally amongst them, they can come to a point where they can do something about the idea that they're having. Soon as they get to that point, their programming, as if somebody flips a switch, suddenly diverts to the red herring in the room, and they devolve. They devolve back into a little ball of tomato throwing about whose poopy pile is prettier than the other person's poopy pile, and whose prison is cooler than the other prison, and how much prison should you have, and my prison's bigger than your prison. Because that's what it sounds like to me. And I mock because it's a childish thing. It plays to our base childish playpen behaviors that we're supposed to grow out of. You're not supposed to remain the mean girl. You're not supposed to remain the bully jock. You're not supposed to remain the geek that hides in the corner. You're not supposed to remain these things. You're supposed to learn from life and grow out of them. And if you're not being given a chance, that's one thing. Because that can happen. People can pin you into a corner and tell you this is who you are your whole life until you actually break out of your cage and find out, no, you didn't have to be that at all. I know. I've always been the opposite of what people thought I was. No matter what it is. I know this personally. And I'll tell you where I lie. I'm fallible and imperfect. And I'll put that forward first. Because then it's, and like it is to myself, it becomes even more enriching when I have a great experience because I'm fallible. And I expect the downs as well as the ups. I don't just expect the ups because that's not life. And I don't learn without the downs and the failures and the mistakes and the faux pas and the stupid stuff. We all do it. And if we don't admit to it, we're admitting that we have a personal failure. When we don't admit to it, when we don't admit to our flaws, when we don't have a sense of humility, when we can't laugh at ourselves and the world around us, you're saying, I'm afraid. You're showing your cards to the people across from you, and you're saying, I'm afraid. And then, look, that's understandable. I'm not going to fault you for that because you just haven't gotten to that point. But I want to urge you to not be afraid. I'm here with you. The greatest people on the planet have been the most faulty wackos. But because they break so many rules and they find so many new ways to live and to take ourselves to another level, their names are etched in history, and their names carry us forward with great ideas of how to be better humans and how to experience more, how to get more out of our lives, and how to travel into the universe and learn more, be more, love more. Life as a sentient creature is a gift, and that's my argument, that we can have that without it being held against us for somebody else's benefit. All right. You ready? I'm ready. I'm sure you're ready. Today, they couldn't handle the truth. Back in the Pearrrrrrrrrl, let's check it out. Where are we? Oh, there we are. Hello, folks. Oh, yeah, you know it's underway. What's going on? The faces of this panel are fabulous. And in the back, you got the vulva. The vulva. Devolver. The devolver. She takes us all back. She's playing every game given to her. Good on her. She's got it all mastered, but she's also clearly in denial about everything that she's doing. Just as much as Pearl. I wish Pearl had her on more often because she's just so fascinating about how just, she is living in her own universe, and good on her. Too bad it probably hurts everybody around her. Same with the guy up on the left. He's got some things. He's got a Tree of Life tattoo on his chest, which suggests he believes in a similar factor that I do, that there is a multi-dimensionality and a history to man that we probably don't recognize. At the same time, he's wearing the lounge lizard outfit, and all he talks about are concepts that he doesn't realize go back to the 1960s pickup con artist game. And there's one woman at the corner. She's married, and they're touting their relationship like it's a flag. We won. I'm better than you bitches because I won. That's another whole, we'll see where you're at in 10 years. Did you grow with your partner? What happened? Everybody's individual. I'm describing the show to you now, but I think the faces say it all. And, there's a lot going on. But, that said, they couldn't handle the truth.
There's worse. There's worse.
How else would you describe it?
Yeah,
you gotta use a
describe
word to
what,
describe it.
Same. I'll just be like, she's just like she gets around. I would just say she gets around. I don't know. I've kind of.
She does a tick.
I've kind of reached this point of avoiding being unnecessarily disrespectful. So for me,
that's
and
nice
I think
of you.
this happens a lot in this space of people get so obsessed with this conservative viewpoint of having to judge people, and I think people get a kick out of being like, you
right on.
3 people 4 years ago, so you are bam, or if you don't do this, then you aren't good enough for these standards, X, Y, Z, and I get that. That is not wrong at all, but.
So he just contradicts himself, by the way, right there, when he says, and I get that, because that's not wrong at all, even though I've just learned that you don't have to be unnecessarily judgmental to a person. I agree with the judgmental behavior, but I don't, is what he's saying. So let's take that aside. I've seen this gentleman grow in his behavior and in his practices and how he sees the opposite sex and how he sees dating and himself. So this is actually a good growth point, because what he's actually talking about here is a date he went on where he prefaced his own thought process in the date and expected an outcome that it turns out he didn't have. And that preconceived notion got in the way of his ability to have a good time, and instead of having a good time and seeing the other person across from him as an actual human, he saw them as his idea, and it failed the date. So he set himself up for failure because of his preconceived notion. And this is something very human. This is something that we all can do to ourselves, which is why I say you too can pull the wool right over your cute little eyes. Yeah, that's right. Just make sure you miss the eyelashes because they'll get caught up in there too. And then you'll never get the wool out of your eyelashes. Oh, all right. So, where are we? Yes. They're talking about simping and hoes and names. If you enjoy sex and you're not being paid for it, you are not a prostitute, you are not a hoe. Okay? If you are on OnlyFans and you're getting paid to sell your body, well, I'm sorry, you are a whore. That is the definition. You are selling your body. There is nothing wrong with sex work, but at least be honest about your job title. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. And it's an old argument that goes back to Dave Chappelle. If I was standing on a street corner in a policeman's uniform and you come up to me and I say, "Excuse me, ma'am, this is just a costume." You may think I'm a policeman, but that I may look like one, but that doesn't make me one. Well, no. Well, it better make you one when somebody needs help. Otherwise, you're impersonating an officer, and that logic stands to reason that if you don't think that you're, you know what I'm saying, a stripper being paid for your body to be looked at, if you don't want to admit to the title, then don't do the job. It's that simple. And if you need the work, there's probably plenty of other options. You just want the money. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it at all. I'm not going to talk shit about that. Sex work is fine. There's plenty of places where it does well for people. And I think it's a necessary thing. I don't think that there's enough sex in the world in general. And we're finding out that in Western society, turns out sex is being withheld from the majority of one gender, that's insane. That it's purposeful, that CDC now has information that shows that there's actually sex being withheld, sexuality, dating being withheld from over half of the young public. Can you imagine that? That's wild, because one group is doing it on purpose, thinking that they're being smart, not knowing that that kind of behavior has a backlash. And I don't think anybody's going to like the crazy whatever happens backlash that happens. It is inevitable. It's human nature. We're conservative for a certain number of years, and then everybody gets tired of being conservative, and we go back to being liberal for a couple of years, and we go back, after a couple of years, we go back to being conservative for a couple of years, back and forth, back and forth. It's humanity. And if you don't know that, then you don't have the perspective of age to say, "Oh, I've seen this happen 3 or 4 times," because that's what happens. Or you're not recognizing it, which is very important, because if you want to live on Earth and not get hit by the trees that fall, you better learn about the cracking sound before the tree falls. Is that too much of a metaphor? Learn the signs of society around you, and you'll notice that the pendulum swings back and forth and never sits in the center. You can catch it in that moment, in that brief moment where it sits in the nice little Goldilocks zone, but it's a fast swing. So you got to take your moments. You got to really enjoy them, because they're fleeting at all times. And that, my friends, is life. Life. Yes. La vida.
I think eventually, and I had a bad hinge day. I learned this like yesterday.
I love this. Get a bad hinge
where
day.
I went off on her about, like, we were talking, and then she was obviously a feminist, and then we had that feminist conversation, and she
On
just
a first date?
I feel
Yes, yes, Pearl. People talk like adults on their first date.
If you have any of those, like, those like, "Oh, men are stupid," or my brother's dumb because he wants to be in finance, he's supporting the patriarchy. I was like, "Oh, right, so you're a feminist. So what would you say if people thought you were like an asshole?" That kind of conversation. And I can afford to do that.
Not the best idea,
but
guys.
essentially, I got kind of reverse traumatized because she basically didn't say anything. And she was very intelligent, went to a top
He got had.
in London.
He tried to start
And
the
I kinda
conversation,
realized
and it didn't
that
work for
traumatized
him.
me. I was like, well, she really didn't talk. She didn't, like. Normally, all the delusions come out, and it's like this, that. And I kind of realized,
Do they?
that was just unnecessarily mean, I guess.
Yes.
Like, even if
Don't
she
be
didn't
an
meet any
asshole
standards, or
just
she
'cause you
had
feel
any
like you
silly
can.
ideas about being,
Deba.
sexually liberated, or
Don't be an
or how
asshole.
many people she
Deba.
slept with.
Deba.
I didn't really need to do that. Like, I could have
No,
seen
you
the best
didn't.
in her, and assumed
Yes, you could have. You
she
could have
was a
seen the best in
decent
her.
person who wants a meaningful relationship, which I think 99% of people are.
Yes.
But instead, I went with
Thank
the red
you.
pill stuff, and
With the red pill stuff.
So that's why I'm on this. Like, do we have to call each other hoes? Could you just be like,
no,
nah,
we don't. And you know what? He makes an interesting point there. He went with the red pill stuff, and it failed him on his date because he was preconceiving the notion instead of seeing people for who they are and recognizing that we're all fallible human beings, which makes us funny. And then we can laugh about ourselves and get past those things and grow together. But we have to be able to build the base loyalty of knowing that you're laughing at the same stupid self as I'm laughing at the same stupid self. And it can't be me laughing at you. It has to be me laughing with you. Which means that if you like to insult people, and that makes you feel good for whatever form of intention that you need, and you do that as a form of love for your partner, I'm going to tell you this right now. Get out of that habit. Your partner doesn't like it. They've just come to accept it because otherwise it starts a fight if they're going to tell you that they don't like it. There's not a single human being that likes for more than a bit of a razzing, being insulted. Especially because it always seems to be that the people who love to insult out of a bowl to make fun, to make themselves feel good, can't take it back. They aren't like me, where you can insult me all day and I'm just going to giggle with you and come up with better insults because I can own it. I can own whatever, trust me, I can own, and you don't want to go into that fight. I'm like a kung fu artist when it comes to, you sling it at me, I'm going to take whatever you said about me and I'm going to own it further and then turn it around in a way you never saw coming, mostly because I have humility. I've achieved enough in my life. I'm not afraid. I'm not a coward. I face things head on. I've already learned that about myself. And that's okay if it makes me the bad guy. I'll be Lex Luthor if that's who you need me to be. But the truth is, I'm neither superhuman nor unusual. I'm just somebody who broke free of the bond of that mental illness, that mental slavery put upon us as a species, practiced upon us since the idea of feudalism was had sometime in the time of the ziggurat after the flood. And yeah, I mean the flood. The Younger Dryas. Not the biblical one. I'm talking about the actual flood that we can see. I actually have I have it in my hill in the yard. I was actually so excited when I found that. Yeah. The second compression layer of ash from volcanic eruption after the earth froze. The Younger Dryas. Anyhow. Mass floods across the planet. Look at that. Yeah. Anyhow, well, when we talk about, I went to Younger. I'll get to this point where the ignorance must be bliss because it keeps me up at night. I love how sure she is of herself. Money makes people sure when they shouldn't be, by the way, and normally creates large blind spots. It'll confuse the young into believing that they're just sure and right when money is just a momentary blockade between finding out, and it just makes a barrier between finding out that you're totally messed up. Because you can be an idiot, you can be a psychopath, you can be all kinds of things and have a lot of money. And it's not till that money's gone, because money comes and goes sometimes, for the most part, unless you're lucky. Over the course of a lifetime, it'll come and go. You'll find out in the hardest of ways. So find out early, kids. Find out your lessons early. Test out the waters on everything early so you don't grow up smug and then end up really smacked when you're much taller much higher off the ground. Especially when your feet are walking 20 feet off the ground like the smug look on Pearly up here. She's so sure of herself, and yet, this is what I was going to say. I don't think Pearly, I would put money that Pearrrrrrrr's never had the real O, not from somebody else. And I don't know if she knows herself well enough to create that. Or if she wants that. It's in her shoulders. It's in her eyes. It's in the responses to things. I don't think this person who is the host of this show, in my HO, it has the perspective to be having those conversations. And I think she's using this conversation as a filter to validate her own ideals that are out of whack with reality. She's using this show to validate her own crazy ideals and then selling them to you. Have you ever bought a lemon? I could have bought a lemon? Yeah. Don't buy that BS, folks. Don't buy it. There's other ways to think. There's other things. There's other ways to approach the whole matter. If your dating life isn't working, this is definitely not the answer. Boiling it down to terms. That's just juvenile. Because humans are complex. We're complex. We're not easily figured out. You have to give people time. You have to learn them, and you have to be open to that. Because if you're not being fair to yourself even. And you need time to learn yourself. It's simple. Know thyself. Know thy own self. First. And then you can host your show and speak from somewhere, unless, of course, you're honest about it and say, I'm trying to figure out what it is I want to date or how I want to marry. And she used to be honest about it, but now some money got in the way, and Pearl's just super sure of a bunch of stuff. And I think it's because it's easier than admitting to the fear set that she'd have to say, I don't know. I just simply don't know. By the way, out here in sunny California, where it's supposed to be flooding and snowing, don't believe the news. I'm 5 minutes away from the freeways stopped. It's because there's snow at the higher altitudes and they got to clear the freeway, just like everywhere else in the world. It just happens to be that we have one major corridor here in California down south. And you can't get up the one. So, yeah, seems worse than it is. And this is exactly my point, is you can make anything look like anything if you take it from the angle that makes it look like that. If I look at the shots from the other angle, you'll see that there's no snow on the road. They won't show you the highway. They just show you it's moving slowly. Yeah. And this is an example. If we keep the conversation over here at Hose and Simps and Hose, maybe then you won't notice that that this isn't the way it is. And I'd actually say that she's trying to manipulate it so it works out in her favor, just like the fresh and mental fits guys.
Going up to a random girl you don't know and calling her a hoe and describing what a hoe
disrespectful.
is.
Yeah, disrespect is never a good
obviously in
dating
person,
plan.
but sometimes even in a group dynamic, like I think we all know what that is without having to be like, because we all know hoe is a derogatory. It's not a respectful term, isn't it? That's why you wouldn't say it to someone.
No, it's not a respectful term
But
at
I'm just
all.
saying, like, we never have this conversation about like simps. Like I think
No, we do. I just don't think that you're taking part in that conversation there, Pearl.
I don't think it's derogatory to call a man a simp.
No, it's not.
And I would do it.
I think it is.
Wait, hold on a second. Why don't you? Okay, so this is what I'm talking about, which is you shouldn't be calling anybody a name. Unless it's idiot or moron, that's fine. No, I'm kidding. It's not good to call anybody a name. And if you're devolving to that, as I often do, and you aren't quantifying it with all the things that this person does not know, making them the idiot or moron, schlemiel, and the schlemazel, which is, by the way, the person who spills and the person who gets spilled on, if you don't speak any Yiddish, which I don't either. I just know it from the Laverne and Shirley theme. I would not know those terms if that Laverne and Shirley. Haas and Pfeffer Incorporated, that's Rabbit Stew Incorporated. The whole theme is disturbingly weird. And if you sing it in the English terms, it gets really strange. Anyhow, now it's in your head if you know what I'm talking about. This conversation that they're having is a false conversation. Is a conversation had so that Pearl can make sense of her own improbable logic, in her own sense of the logic. She's not making sense of it for you, she's making sense of it for herself. And I would beware of that logic. Self-discovery is one thing, but telling others that your self-discovery is the discovery of all time is not safe. Because what happens when you change and learn that you've been making a huge error? Oh, then the whole thing comes crashing down. All right, Pearl? All right, Pearl? Well, you haven't gotten there yet because you're 25. You may never get there because your money may protect you from the fall. And I gather that as soon as you get married, as soon as you meet someone sincerely, you're going to stop doing this show. I almost put money on it. And I would say, I urge Pearl not to, because your show, you really would be much more interesting and be much more valuable to society at large by never stopping, by just working the show because you have a show. Like, would Oprah have given up her show like the moment she met Stedman? Of course not. That's her business. Stick to your business. And I say this because not long ago she made a video that she was about to give up because she wanted to go home and find herself a partner. And it's like, yo, you've got a business. I hope your father turned to you and said, yo, no, that's ridiculous. Grow up. And I say grow up because this is the difference between a child mindset who thinks that you have to give up one thing for the other, and the adult mindset that knows, no, you start a project, you work a project, you just build project on project on project on project, and sometimes you got a bunch of them like plates in the air, and you also have to be a human at the same time. It's not flippin' easy. It's tough. It's trying and keeps you up at night. But you know what? It's better than not living and living in a cave under a rock like a gopher, digging in the dirt. That's what life is, to excite oneself with the experiences. Positive as much as you can, but they're always going to include negative. You're never going to avoid that. That's living in the universe, people. Okay? Okay.
That's
terrible. That's you just like burning, like putting your finger in the scalp.
But it's like if you call a man a simp, he might stop simping. If you call a girl,
no, Pearl, that's not how that works.
Simps don't do that.
If you call someone an asshole, they might stop being an asshole.
No, I think sometimes like that's how a lot of guys in the red pill space get started. Most guys. I think most guys have been taken advantage of by a girl they were simping for at some point.
Everybody does, though. Everybody does. That's when you dig people, you compromise yourself, and the suggestion that you don't is childish. It's entitled, as if you don't have to adapt. Not to say you don't have to give up, because people think like the word compromise means to give up, just like to be submissive to your partner doesn't mean that you're going to submit to being beaten. It means that you're submissive to their interests. You're submissive to their love. You're submissive to their companionship. You're submissive to... There's so many more pieces to that conversation that are just conveniently left out because they're not thinking of it because they don't have the healthy perspective to see that. And sometimes now in the modern day, we get the right, can you imagine this? We get the ability to experience these things, to learn and to grow from the old concepts that were more about caveman fight or flight mentalities. So goodness forbid us from actually evolving. And that's really what this is in the conversation. Let's stop. Let's put a glass layer on top of the prison because you don't want people going out there and finding out that you don't have to think this way. No, you don't. No, because then we look like we're ancient Victorian ideals left over from the 19th and 18th century, and that actually date back to Constantine's time in the 900. Yeah, you hear me. Baka, baka, baka. It's all nonsense. It spirals itself on purpose. So the red herring takes over the logic of the conversation, and we aren't having a conversation about why or what's good even. It just devolves into who likes what more. I like tapioca and you like chocolate, but tapioca's better. Let's fight about it. We're supposed to leave these behaviors behind us. But a certain number of people benefit from us having those behaviors and having this conversation and argument and pretending that we don't have to be honest about our intentions. Pretending that we don't have to tell people what it is that we're trying to actually achieve. We'll just get everybody talking and glean what we want and never mention that we have a goal that's underlying. It's dishonest, and that's one of the things that I pick out about this show quite honestly, quite often. It's dishonest on so many levels. It would pretend to be something it's not. It's not a self-help. Unless, of course, you're from a certain ilk, a certain vein of society that relates to the fresh and the mental fits. It feeds into the same psyche. But notice that they're all jocks. They're all athletes. They're all talking about a shallow concept of humanity. And who benefits from it? That little group. Just reinforces what I've been saying about how the prisons are just there for us to reinforce our own bad ideas and scream at each other and feed off of our own little world, and also put us into groups that are easy to pick out of. Trust me, somebody else benefits from this conversation.
No, I know a list of people that are simping as hard as they possibly can.
I bet you do.
I know a lot of my sisters are simping too.
Trying to please people? Yes. Oh, good. I hope people don't please each other. Good God.
Same thing with girls. Like, if you start getting called a hoe, you might do it less.
But
No, that's not how that works. People get challenged and then double down.
Permanent kind of stamp. Like,
No, not hoe. I would say whore or something.
Whore.
Yeah,
But you know what? We all know that.
I love it. She's making the same face. It's like it's all just
You can't be like, oh, you've changed.
It's like you're moving a bit loose.
You're actually having
I
that.
don't mean to call you out, but then you come in and the first thing you said, like, hoe. So it's like that's a fun term to say.
I do.
Hoe.
I wouldn't allow.
It's a fun term.
Myself a hoe in a phone. My daughter's 18, and there's no way I would be like, oh yay, you're a hoe, because it's fun.
You might not hear it, but she's probably doing it.
No, hear her having sex? She's having sex.
No. Why'd you jump to that?
Like,
Whoa.
Hearing sex.
As a fun.
If you saw my daughter and met my daughter, you'd know she's not. But it's like I wouldn't, as a mother to a girl, be like, "Oh, this is a fun term." If it was a fun term, I would be okay with using it, but it's not a fun term.
No, because it's not.
It's the same as slut. It's the same thing.
Yeah, and some people like to call themselves that because they want to.
I think simps are simps, hoes are hoes.
I don't think it's being honest. I think it's being deriding of the self. It's being deriding of the self. And there's a difference between having humility and making fun of the self. And in one way, they are describing. Yeah, some of these girls are calling themselves hoes and slags and sluts, just as a man would. And there's nothing wrong with that. Unless, of course, that's what you're being labeled because you said it about yourself and somebody else is taking advantage of that label, which is what is the base and end result, the based situation of that this ends up creating. Saying we all make mistakes or we're all hoes sometimes, that's different. Calling yourself a hoe repeatedly and then acting that out, well, then that's different. And men and women both do that. But it makes it a negative. So we all have to admit what is a negative or not. I'm a horrible person. That's a negative, right? I'm a good person. That's a positive, right? Let's not go back to the 80s where we were calling things bad and everybody was like, what do you mean bad, good or good, bad? No, that's bad, bad. Not bad, good. Good, bad, bad. We don't, no, English does mean something when we're talking about language or whatever language you speak. The terms are specific. If we have to argue over the base terms, then we can't even have a discussion. Get my drift? You get my drift? Okay.
What I've noticed about women is that the second they want to diss another woman, so in your own world, forget men for a second.
Yeah, forget us.
Another woman wants to degrade another woman, what's the first thing they call her? A slut. Yeah. You're a hoe. You're a slag.
Okay,
you're this,
but that's
you're
a
that.
generalization that just depends on
group. That is not
but
the
that's
category
the thing,
they
if
want to
you're
be
not
in.
slag,
You're talking
not
about
gonna
clubbing.
get offended. Like if someone calls me a bitch or ignorant or something, I'm like, yeah, all right, cool. But if someone
by the
calls
way,
me a
adults, adult women tend to use the C word. So when you're talking about hoe, I know exactly what age group you're talking about. I know where you're at. You're in the clubs or the bars or no, chat group. No. A grown woman, she throws the C word first because she knows that's going to have just a harpoon value. I've heard it over and over. And unless you're in Australia, well, even in Australia where they use it as a friendly, they turn it around like a harpoon. When the C word comes out like, blunt, and all hell breaks loose. So no, this is what we're talking about. Sticks and stones may break everybody else's bones, but dang, this generation in particular has a problem with words. And that's because I don't think they know what they mean all the time. I think they think they could just make up a meaning because they saw people slightly misusing a word, and so they ran off with that idea, which is, another concept of this generation that has been sold that you could just make up the meaning of everything. And no, words mean something. Reality can be distorted by our ideas and intentions, and it depends on whether or not reality follows those things as to whether or not it's a delusion. A delusion. And I think a lot of times it is a delusion, and nobody around is being kind. Everybody's being too busy polite. Kind and polite, not the same thing. You can be unkind and be polite. Meaning, I'm not telling you the honest to God truth about your whale tail hanging out and the smell of it, man or woman. That we can all smell your whale. And actually, there's a little sludge we can see because you're wiping in a strange way. Yeah, you heard me. That applies as a metaphor to the way people behave. Being polite is not specifically being kind. And in most cases nowadays, people think politeness can be used as a weapon. And they do. Stop it. Cut it out. If you can't eat out of that bowl, trust, it's coming back, especially if I have anything to say. Anyways, this discussion is about a certain group of people. And they're the ones benefiting from the sloppy 12th, being dropped back down to them out of their little prison cell, arguing over the little slices and crumbles and bits.
Also, and I'll be like, get your facts straight.
I do think so.
Because technically anyone can be a slag, right? If you slept with more than one person, someone can say you're a slag. Sorry, you're saying?
I do think that it does just depend on the person. Like I have friends
it's
that
just a
like
drop
they're
base
19, their body count
that
is
drops
like
the conversation.
over 100.
Yeah.
Over
100?
Yeah, and they're proud hoes.
Yes,
like,
people have sex.
Call themselves hoes. They call
people have sex, Pearl. Over 100. Because she can't picture it for herself. She can't imagine that it's a good thing. She has no idea. But then again, she's trying to save herself for her future husband, who, by the way, I would hope was as inexperienced as she is. So they can both have an unfulfilling sex life and have to look for everything else to be a fulfilling life. Those are the people, by the way, that end up having a sexless marriage because they don't know what makes them feel good. Or what makes, Now, there's an extreme to the other end that was sold to the public. But that's because we have the ability to own ourselves and explore. And some people have self-control issues. That's just a base fact. And now we've learned that men and women both have self-control issues. Welcome to the modern world. Don't be freaked out. Women just got access to the sexual marketplace freely about 50 years ago, so cut them a little slack. The issue becomes when somebody else in the system takes advantage of that and sells a whole generation of people on a bunch of BS so they get funneled into one little grain mill, one little slaughterhouse line, believing that there's only one type of person they can be with because that's the only way that they're going to be saved from whatever fear-driven socioeconomic plane they believe they're supposed to be, instead of accepting that they, like everybody else, are normal, that we're not special, that there's 8 billion of us, that what's special about us is our individuality and the ability to be individuated with alongside someone else and share that individualness and have somebody appreciate us for our individualness, not fitting into the corral of moo. Because what you're doing is you're being fed in a conveyor belt system that fits into the ideal for one purpose, the benefit of somebody and a system you don't even see and you don't actually benefit from. You don't even get to experience or enjoy because you're in some competition that makes no sense, that isn't a part of reality. It's part of the reality that's been manipulated and manufactured for you. And I have a great video with Dr. Stephen Greer that gets into some of that, by the way.
It's like call themselves.
But that's what I said about the lack of
That's a sign of mental
understanding.
It's just
No, it's not. It's the sign that
it's
the sign of mental illness. That you slept with 100 people. No, dude. No. I would actually argue that the sign of mental illness is the immediate rejection because you're in such a fear state that it couldn't possibly be that people express their sexual freedom and had sex with that many people. Yeah, because what's going to happen is later on they're going to slow down. Or not. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll be a swinger. Maybe they'll, to each their own. But I also want to say that coming up here, Pearl holds the cards out and expresses what it is they're actually in fear of and tries to act like it's what actually happens in life, and it's not. And I don't want anybody to be in fear because of the BS that she spreads on this. Because she's 26 years old and she has no clue. She's never had the O face. I guarantee you can see it in her shoulders. And I challenge her to tell me otherwise. That someone else gave her the O face because I bet you she doesn't even know herself. And she freaks out and probably cringes like a 12-year-old in response when one of her friends, I can tell her friend has. Oh, her friend has explored that hard. Her roommate, the 6'3" girl, you can see it in her eyes. She knows how to over and over again and wishes Pearl could too. Swear. I know that conversation has happened. I'm old enough to see. I can see through the walls. No, it's just, we're human. We're human. Goodness. Anyhow, the fear-driven politic in this conversation is so amazing, and I'm telling you right now, if this is a show you're watching, if you're watching Pearly, it's a projection. She can't handle the truth. It's not that they can't. She can't handle the truth, and she doesn't want to, so she's figured out a way to manufacture reality so that the truth that she makes just gets echoed right back at her.
I think some of my friends are they have trauma and they are damaged in a way where they don't that's the only way they can seek validation is from having sex with, and it's very unhealthy, but
and it's very sad.
So it depends. That is actually a thing. Seeking validation through sex, not healthy, but it also comes to the fact that we as humans also have this thing where we seek validation through negative. But we all grow out of it, and it's whether or not a person has the ability to self-reflect on whether or not that's something they are just doing for negative attention, or that's something they want. And I hear a bit of projection in the conversation and suggestion that just these girls are just, they're doing it because they're damaged. And that, are they? We don't know that. That's just what she's saying for the course of the conversation. And to be frank with you, at a certain level, I don't believe anybody at a certain level of these conversations Because I think peer pressure plays so much a role into what people want to say so that they're noticed in the conversation that it's not unlike. And especially when people are telling you that they see the negative projection side or the fact that people get attention out of negativity, that they themselves are actually trying to have the conversation to get the negative attention. That's why I pick the fights I do. You think that it's accidental, that I'm just like, I don't know why I'm doing this. Come on. That's one of the things that bothers everybody, by the way, is that the modern, don't call yourself an adult if you're creating situations and acting like the people around you don't realize that you're perpetrating them. In most cases, people are too polite or simply too lazy to spend the time to tell you that they know that you're full of BS. That's why you don't hear about it. And that's one of the problems we have in modern society. There's not enough people getting smacked by reality quick enough and becoming accountable. Mostly because we've been taught as a society not to tell a certain gender that they may be wrong about anything. And that's not equality. Equality is accountability equally. Equanimity, that's us all getting similar effects and responses. And if you don't want that, well, too bad. It's too late. You're born into a world where that exists. And if you reject it, that's the mental illness. Rejecting the reality, the delusion. That's the mental illness. Exploring life, exploring what makes you happy, exploring a different dongle every day. No, that's life. That's happiness. That's somebody who's finding themselves and finding life. Because trust me, that, whatever effect it has later on, has nothing to do with you. You don't need to worry about that. What you need to worry about is what you're unaware of and what you, for yourself, are not enjoying. The more time you spend looking at your neighbor trying to figure out why they're doing something and what you think is wrong about that, the more time you're not looking at yourself trying to figure out what you like, what you want to do. And if you think that that's accidental, I'm going to tell you right now, nope, there's an obelisk that you're a part of, that you've been sold into a little frame of, like a beehive. And you're just there as a structure to hold up the top, known as the ben-ben. And my proposition of this entire idea of talking to you is to say we can smash and take ourselves out of being that obelisk and stop holding up the ben-ben. We don't have to be this structure. We've been sold a bill of lies, a form of mental slavery. And this stupid-ass conversation above me is part of the shim-flam-flimmery-flammery that's been sold to you. Because someone like Pearly Things would make you and have you believe that you really, well, the only answer is to be a virgin and to get married, and it's 1955. But the reality is it's a lack of perspective, and her 26-year-old, and it's what works for her parents in this situation. Even though what works for her parents wouldn't work anywhere else than in that situation, because it's all about individuals. She doesn't realize that, but she wants to apply the rule for one thing to everything. She wants to apply the exception to the rule. And that's something she brings up a lot. Oh, well, that's the exception, not the rule. Pearly, that's what you're trying to apply. The thing that works for your parents that you want to emulate. Not realizing that you could recreate your parents 10 feet away from where they started, and that's not going to happen for the next couple. It's just not. But you don't want to admit that, despite the fact that you're not having the same kind of experience, because you live in a different time. And that's the delusion, folks. That's the actual mental illness. Trying to force things into a mold that they're not. Square is not circle. Circle is not triangle. I think we all know that in kindergarten. But I have to break it down that way because it's the easiest metaphor to explain it. Metaphor. That was weird. Freudian. All right.
Like taught from a young, I'm not saying young, but like if they were maybe given the facts about things like we spoke about, like para bonding or the likelihood of divorce and the likelihood of not finding someone or not being able. Do you not think that they would actually? Okay, fair enough. I fucked up in the past, but you know what?
Statistically, how many people are growing up in one-parent families where they're not taught that dynamic of two-parent households, so they're not taught how to be. I'm just saying. I'm just talking generalization.
She asked how many.
Personally,
it's a preface.
It takes that dynamic to you're an anomaly.
No,
I just don't buy it. Like when the girls are like, "Oh, I didn't know, I had no idea." Like if you didn't know, then your first reaction when a girl pisses you off wouldn't be to call her a slut. Like I think.
I don't think so. I think you're. Well, okay. When she loves to confabulate ideas. Calling somebody a nasty name as a knee-jerk response out of your box of tools is not what you actually think they are because you're projecting your worst fear on them. No, it's just a word you know will hurt them. And once again, I bring it back to adult women tend to use the C word first, which I think is funny. It's just lacking in this, and especially because in the British culture, they also use that word too. Bloody C. So I think it's interesting that it's just like the elephant in the room, and it lets you know that there is this uptight rigidness within the conversation that's not being admitted to.
I don't know, but I think
everything comes from what your parents teach.
You just want to say that you know.
It comes from a lot of things.
I think the women that are blurring the line of the word hoes are the women that are in between being a hoe and being married, and that space in between there is a dangerous space for women to be in. Because the whole
dangerous space. Okay, all of this is just nonsense conversation. Blurring the lines between hoe and about to be married. It's like hold on a second, man. Are you talking about an actual prostitute, or even then it doesn't make any sense because those are two different. A physical state of being versus the interests of long-term relationship are two different. They're two different places, folks. They don't have one thing to do with the other, and it's a very juvenile idea to conflate the two. What we do with our body is not the same as what we do with our relationship. If you try to conflate the two, you're going to get upset. You're going to have problems. And that's one of the things. This is like, I would say this is one of these guys who tries to say that he's not concerned about his own body count, but he's concerned about others. He plays a double standard. And really, if you're just human, you don't play double standards. It doesn't matter how much you want to claim this or that. If you're a real humanist, you expect the same standards for others that you do for yourself. And it's just that simple, people. Otherwise, you're full of shit. And you're trying to pretend that nobody's going to notice. And it's just been that people have been too polite to you so far. Or they're just don't want to even deal with it because they don't want to deal with the cognitive dissonance like I will. We're all stare straight in the face and listen to it. Blah, blah, blah. Because I'm going to call it out. I can't stand it anymore. It's stupid, and we got to move forward with our evolution, people. And the thing that's stopping us is this glass ceiling of mental slavery hidden behind an intent to sell us all down the river so that we stand in our prisons and fight with each other like little tribal groups about how awesome our prisons are. Tell you how pretty our pooping pile. Well, Pearl, I'm not letting you sell people on this used car. Because if you let people sell you on an absolutely incredibly stupid idea, you can probably let them sell you on an atrocity too.
Like real hoes, like for real, that know they're coming and smashing everybody in the room. They don't give a shit.
Real hoes. He's
like you
really
said,
convinced
they're
of
proud
himself.
hoes.
Yeah,
and
but
then they'll let you know that they're a hoe, and they'll make it clear that we hoes and we out here twerking.
Okay. Once again, confabulating young man. You are confused between somebody declaring themselves wildly as for fun and you're taking it seriously. And that makes me concerned about your lack of perspective and how concerned and how in fear you are. I think Devolva is actually having the same thought, and it's hurting her head because it's just such simple, very, very childish, very juvenile, junior high, somebody who's really still playing the emotional state. That's the things that went on in junior high and high school, maybe uni. You kept carrying that practice through, which is a lot of these folks are. They think everything is still the high school football game. And trust me, when you're an adult, it's not. It's so much more convoluted and strange. It's everything. It's all things possible. And money only affects a certain little populace, and we all know who they are. They present themselves as human flim-flam. They've got to peacock the most, they got to tell you the most, they got to tell you who they are, and everybody, to be honest with you, discounts them in the long run. Yeah, Pierre? Pierre tells me I should wrap it up soon. Yeah, hey, he knows. He's got an internal clock. It's astonishing. This dog. And he's also looking at me like, bro, they might have the point. I don't think they do. We still have a little more time. There's 4 more minutes of video, buddy. Yes. Yes, there is. 4 more videos. I'm sorry. He is the cutest dog in the world that you will never see. I'm never going to. You're just going to hear him in the background, snorting, scratching, licking himself inappropriately. It's my joy. It's mine. But as a great example, you don't know it. This is actually a great example about perception. You can't see Pierre, but you know he's there. He can be doing all kinds of things, and I can be describing it as whatever, but because you don't know it for yourself. I could tell you that he's a 130-pound dog. He's not. He's 19 pounds. He's a little fluffy thing. Chews on himself. Has an immune disorder of some nature. You know. Got him at the pound. Best friends, kids. Best friends. If you're in the U.S., Western U.S., go get your dog from Best Friends or cat. Adopt. Save them. Save them all. Because they love you. They do love you for it. Anyhow, back to, they can't handle the truth. Because that's the truth. None of these people seem to be able to handle the truth. And they're doing everything to deflect away from facing reality. And the toughness of being a human. And how much you actually have to commit to really be deep or be more than just a shallow piece of paper. Because no matter what, the more shallow you are, the less you're going to get out of things. That's why most people in the U.S. are unhappy, is because they believe that they could be shallow and they'd get more out of life. And guess what? It's not true. You don't get that. You don't get to put nothing in and expect everything back. It's just, you're going to be unhappy. It doesn't matter how much stuff you have. The more stuff you fill the hole with, the less the hole gets filled. You hear that? The more stuff you try to fill your empty hole with, the less your hole gets filled. It's human connection, honesty, self-value, and valuing the people around you that gives you a filling sense of life, experience, finding your true happiness, and whatever that be. You might be surprised, but you have to allow yourself that space to experience it. Dang it.
Like you at the other end of the spectrum, have a different perspective. The women in the middle that are single, trying to get out of the hoe phase, trying to get out of the hoe section. That's why they blur the line of like, oh, I'm not a hoe, I'm just dating. Oh no, this is just my phase.
Yeah,
this
but
is my
people are.
I think like it's a mating strategy though. Like I think it's just like the top. Like women fight for the top 20% of men, 5% of whatever it is.
No,
10% of men.
No. Okay, so this is one of those things. It's just a mating strategy. Okay, so you wouldn't say that about the men, and it's not a mating strategy. What this is it's a modern delusion to say to oneself, I am not behaving the way that I am behaving. And that's where we need to call it out across the board, because it allows for so many other behaviors. Just say, oh no, I'm having a good time. I'm out here having a good time. I'm dating as many people as I can, having a lot of sex. But our culture didn't allow us to say that to one another. That becomes an affront, especially if you run into one of these dudes. And I understand why you might be afraid, but you know what? That's the thing, is we also have to make the behavior of this dude not right. because it's childish and juvenile. Don't laugh at a guy like this. He'd get so incensed, I guarantee you. He'd want to fight. And it's even funnier to me when that comes up, because it's like, bro, you can't even be in the arena of conversation without getting aggressive. That makes you a beta, so you're in fear. Because the sigmas and the omegas, they're not going to react to that. Only alphas and betas will, because they're meant to fight. Yes, Pierre. Yes, Pierre. I know the clock is up. I know the clock is up. Yes, I do. All right. Well, they couldn't handle the truth.
And I think, like, there's a group of women that know they can't get their attention any other way. It's like either they're too far gone, so there's no way they're going to wife them. So, you know what?
So, okay, this is all her fears, by the way, that's coming up. They're too far gone, so somebody won't wife them. Let me just give you a little hint. There is actually somebody for everybody. It just happens to be that there is a cultural mindset that there isn't, so people are starting to experience that perpetration of a lie. When we know for a fact, I know for a fact throughout my life, I've met plenty of people. I've had plenty of love. I've had plenty of sex. I've had plenty. But it's about whether or not I give myself access to it and put myself out in the world. And I don't think I have to work any harder than a woman. I really don't. I just, only rarely use the dating apps. And when I have, I've experienced that the people on those apps come with a lot of unrealistic ideals. They're looking for something as if they can shop for humans and trade them out when they don't like them anymore, when that's the base agreement about relationships and companionship is friendship. Just first and foremost is loyalty and reliability. Because if you can't rely on your partner, if they're always looking off in the distance, then they're not reliable. And that's why things aren't working. And if you think that there's always going to be something greener on the other side of the fence, you're not going to be happy. It's not because only 20% of the people are dating everybody. That's a symptom, not the actual illness. The illness is believing in this perpetrated bullshit. The illness is sitting in your cage, throwing poop, telling everybody else that your poop is prettier and that the other tribe doesn't know what they're talking about. That's just us being separated. That's just us being separated off to fight so that we don't pay attention. Who's keeping us separated?
Signal, easy sex, and I'll get their attention.
And that goes down to insecurity.
Whose attention?
That goes
See,
into
that's the thing is,
I
think she doesn't know how to approach sex, so she thinks that it's an either or. That's, I've got to give out easy sex. But she says 3 times, by the way. Methinks she doth protest too much. I don't think she has enough experience with it to speak from any matter. I mean, it's kind of written on her that she doesn't. And her friend, her roommate, has given her away several times in those feeds that she is not that experienced, that she's afraid of sex. So you need to keep in mind that grain of salt when the 26-year-old with not a lot of sexual experience and or dating experience, it turns out, is giving us all the what it is and what it isn't. We're just talking about her perspective and opinion and not on the stats. Because I've been looking at the stats and she would have you believe they mean something that they do not mean. Happiness is not a result of the relationships, but the lack of relationships. The unhappiness rate is caused by the lack of relationships. Happiness is in positive, well-meaning reciprocal relationships. Not what you can get from someone. Because it doesn't matter what you get. I have to say this again. Doesn't matter how many things and how much money you have. That's momentary. That's fleeting. What fills our souls as the little monkeys that we are on this planet is comfort, companionship, and being able to rely on others. That's it. It's pretty simple. That's why men tend to ask for simple things in a relationship, because that's literally throughout history what we've been taught to ask for. And women's complex views of these things, because of their homemaking in past history, and because of their ability to contemplate literally more and multitask has been taken advantage of, folks. That's the only thing I will say in all of this conversation, is that one gender has been taken advantage of quite literally by a whole business. And the other gender has been taken advantage of in the sense that it doesn't matter if they wanted to break out of it. It's going to take both genders to break out of, all genders to break out of this mold of idea, if this is how it's going. Because it's so much more than that. The battle is about a freedom of mind and ability to be who you want to be. Not who we're made to be, made out to be, forced to be by a limited availability that is manipulated and manufactured scarcity. Manufactured by a group of people that would have you stay alone because of your ideals. That would have you not experience life because of their fears. That would have you not experience happiness because it's easier to give everything to a small group of people who then tell you, don't worry, you don't need this.
I think it's self-esteem. I think like the world will just let you know real quick where you're at.
I do.
And I think it's like no, I think it's girls that are punching.
That's true.
It's
That's
like
true.
You know, you might.
No,
girls,
I just think that everybody's being sold on. It's not okay. She's about to bring up Brittany Reiner. And it lets you know everything that she doesn't know about life and her perspective, by the way, as an older person. If I'm going to speak as the elder in the room in this situation, what I'm going to tell her and tell you may shock you, but it's not going to shock the actual adults in the room. It's just going to shock the children. What she says about Brittany Reiner coming up isn't just a lack of perspective because she doesn't know any better, but it's a flat out lie that's making her feel better about her false beliefs, about her bullshit that she's selling over and over. Brittany Reiner's going to find a wealthy married man. She's going to do well, her kid's going to be well when she decides to go looking for that. Just going to happen. It's going to happen. Counter to whatever the lack of experienced Pearl says. Don't believe it. Don't believe this BS. Because let me tell you something. A couple of years from now, Brittany Reiner's going to be just fine. She'll be in a relationship. She'll be married. She's going to date plenty of other men. It's a ridiculous thing. People like each other for who they are. They don't count their bodies. Not when you're an adult. That's rude. It's unnecessary because our experiences give us a wider set of credentials, not a lesser set of credentials, despite your best efforts there, Pearl. So the more you try to validate your limitations and your fears, your inability to taste foods that are outside of your comfort zone, the more you say to the world and people with experience like me that you're just afraid of everything and you want everybody to agree with you that it's okay that you're afraid of everything. Can I say? It's what it is. You don't have the perspective to speak on the subject. But you will because you want to validate your point of view. And that's okay. I understand. That is a human fallibility. But you don't have the humility to say that you don't know any better. You speak as if you do. And so I chastise you even before I let you go into this little rant that you do about some other person's capability of finding love or happiness in their life when you yourself are an example of someone who doesn't know. It's wild. It is your religious and wealth background dictating to you an entitlement to the idea without knowing any difference. And it is everything of why I say, put the microphone down. Time to learn more for you and be more open to what it is that you can learn from life and stop selling everybody on a mental prison. It's not healthy. It's not cool. And it may be selling really well because you're making money off of it, but you're hurting people. You're hurting people and their chance to actually find happiness and love, Pearl, while you think that you're trying to help them. It's kind of gross.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah. Do you know what it is?
That's an insane.
No,
What does that mean,
she's
bro?
so far gone that no guy's gonna wife
She's
her,
an
right?
honest, proud
No,
hoe.
wait, stop.
Honest.
Like, that's what I'm saying.
No
but, like,
guy's
she's so
gonna
far
wife
gone that
her.
no
Can you
guy.
tell us
She's
Wait,
so
wait.
far
So,
gone.
yes,
She
yes,
said.
okay. So Brittany Renner, she's a public hoe. So basically, she's just been with a lot of like athletes.
Okay, so that's very interesting. It hurts my head because it's just Pearl holding out her cards saying this is what she thinks of other people. This is, hi Pierre, come on back in. Now he's like, are you still going? Yes, I am. She's holding her cards out to tell you what she fears. It's not what she's concerned about, it's what she fears. What she fears of herself. You can see it in her eyes. And in fact, hold on a second. Should I have a screenshot for this? Screenshot this stuff. Hold on a second. Can I? It'll let me. Screenshot the program. All right, there we go. Cool. Yeah, that's going on the front page. Her fear set about virginity and sex and what she doesn't know is based on her lack of experience. So she would have you believe that just applies to everything in the world. When everything in the world says opposite. Ivanka Trump. There's so many more. There's so many more. You'd have to be as naive as a child to believe that. And I believe she is. So break out of the mold, Pearly. Break out of your prison. There's more. You aren't just wrong. You're laughably wrong when you say this. No man will women. What men? What are you talking about? Adults don't give a damn about that. It's about something deeper and more complex than you could possibly imagine. And it's only shallow children, emotional children, who end up with those issues. The happiness level in the U.S. and in the Western world has nothing to do with our marriage stats. Marriage stats are a symptom of our unhappiness with ourselves and our choices. And the fact that we keep making shallow choices, not that we need to make shallow choices because that's what makes us happy. You've got it backwards, Pearl. Pearl! Little kid. It's a little kid idea. If I just keep adding toys and deny the sinking feeling that it doesn't fill the void, at some point it will. If I just get enough toys to fill that void. No, that's a black hole you're trying to fill. Compassion, reason, empathy, humanity, and humility. That's what gets you to happiness. That's what gets you to experience those moments in life of the up and down. And they're not all perfect. That's the other thing is I think Pearl thinks that everything is supposed to be perfection, as if she sees that in her parents when her parents tell her over and over, Pearl, this isn't perfect, this is hard. Look at the interviews with them. She said, by the way, and I think you've heard me say this, that her father's never cried in front of her, and he literally weeps in front of her during that interview. And then describes another time where he cries in front of the whole family. And then his mom, her mom says, yeah, he weeps quite often. Because as you get older, you become more in tune with yourself and your feelings. And you're more honest about them. And you're more able to express them without feeling any shame about them. Because that's being an adult and having an emotional IQ above that of a 12-year-old. But if you're not evolving and you're just trying to stick in the zone that works for a few people, like a rat race to make it work, you're never going to evolve. You're never going to grow up, folks. And it's important that we all do. That's how we achieve happiness. We learn what we need. And we allow more into our lives to enrich ourselves. We can't roll back the tide, but we can evolve. Pearl!
As entertainers, like she's like known for sleeping with a lot of people in the industry so much. So she wrote a book.
Yes, she did.
And like she didn't use any of their names, but people kind of put together who they were. And then she also like posted videos about like how to catch a baby off of an NBA player. Like they're the
and you know,
showed me her. Yeah, okay, no.
Yeah. You know what is sad about like public figures like this? Like no hate, do what you want to do, etc. But I remember literally being in secondary school, like 15, 14 years old, and like my friends would get up her videos on Instagram and they'd be like, oh, see, so like it is fine that my body count is this and it is fine that I've had sex with this many people. Like, I don't care. But sex is being so devalued in today's society.
Okay, well, first off, sex doesn't have a value. Sexuality doesn't have a value unless you're selling it. And that's part of this argument that seems illogical to me. That there's some confabulation that's sold to these folks that sex has a value when the only time that sex has a value beyond interpersonal is when it's being sold. So are we just turning everybody into sex workers? Does everybody now have to be a hooker and a prostitute and we have to set values? Because then nobody's getting laid. And that would be terrible. Trust me, sex keeps the peace on earth. It really does. Because there's this old story. Sex is a palpably powerful tool, which one could argue that sex is being used against a whole section of the public right now. What I was going to say is there's this old story about back in the day with the Greeks where there was a town of women who didn't want their men to go off to war anymore. So they said, we're not having sex with you. We're not having your children anymore if you go off to war. And guess what? It kept all the men home. What a powerful tool to say, nope, you ain't getting laid. That little physical joy you enjoy? Nope. Enjoy your hand. Enjoy that jar of livers and hearts warmed up by the fireside. You heard me. And it worked, apparently. I mean, I don't know if that's history or lore. But it sure is a powerfully realistic story about how one gender can use sexuality as a tool against the other. It could be argued that men couldn't use it against women, but I think it can be. I think if men just simply abstained, one, it'd be magical and they wouldn't believe it. And you see it in the rejection videos out there, by the way, that when a man goes, no, I'm not that interested in you, women melt because they're supposed to be just accepted, or apparently the ones that they pick, which are, this is an example of narcissism, malignant narcissism, not just women in general. But men have had to learn rejection over time and learn to build the filters and the armor against it. Whereas in the modern day, women have not, in general, in our Western society, not been taught that kind of armory or to defend themselves or have any defense against it. So it'll hit in a different place, of course. Oh, you found the weakness in a psychological armor. Well, yeah, because that's where in the evolution scale they just haven't gotten. They'll get there. Trust. Because the more egalitarian and the more equal we all become, the more likely society will swing the other way and be like, all right, ladies, you've had 50 years of free reign and free roam. Now you get to play by the same rules. And guess what? Sexuality will be used against you. There'll come a point because that's the way the balance of the world works. These folks would have you believe otherwise. But they don't know because they haven't been here long enough. Simply. And sometimes that lack of perspective can harm you and make you look silly. And that's what I'm saying is going on here.
Society, sorry. But yeah, like, I don't think it should be praised to be a hoe. I think, yeah, if you want to be sexually free,
what if
be
you're a good
sexually
hoe?
free.
What if you're the
Matahari?
Matahari?
Don't care that you're sexually free or they have a sexually free past. Like, just like we were saying, you accept people for their flaws.
Shush,
Some
shush,
people
Pearl.
would, but
You don't know any different and you're scared of sex.
I do think public figures like that is quite a
Please
negative.
agree. Someone agree with me. Look, did you see the panic in her face? Like, nobody's... And look at homegirl, dude up here. Look, Pearl, your fear of sex is not other people's fear of sex. And your fear of sex, I would say, is driven by your religious beliefs and by your upbringing where you grew up. And your fear of what other people say about you. I think you have a lot of fear about what other people say about you. And that's what's driving all of your conversations. It's amazing. Because there's so many people just feeding off of you and your fears. It's insidious in a certain way. Which is why I'm saying to the audience, don't buy into it. It's blish. It's a lemon. Make a sour face.
On modern girls.
That simp is not going to be the guy you want, though.
I was even about to jump in
What are you talking about? It's probably exactly
like,
the guy you want because he'll eat, eat a mile of shit to get your ass. We each need people that are willing to be reliable and loyal to us for all the right reasons because they see us for us. And this term simp is as if, somebody really sees me for me and is really down for the game, for me. I mean, it's just like, what a way to undermine people with good intentions. What a way to just knock out a whole field of people that might be better for you. Egomaniacal belief system being sold to you by the worst possible and least common denominator. Someone who has their interest in reaping the rewards off of what you believe. I can't go on with it anymore. I think Pierre's right. I think I gotta take a break on this one. Because the truth is, they couldn't handle the truth. That's right, Pearl. You can't handle the truth. This is insane. How did I get dragged back in here? Nice socks, by the way, bro. Nice socks. I like those. Those are cool. Anyhow, and I'm so glad to see that he's having some growth. Some personal growth. That's great. Anyway, like and subscribe. And don't forget, folks, there's more to this conversation to be had. Way more. The simplification is just a juvenile attempt to explain something they don't have the perspective to know. And we'll get at that because there's so much more to life and joy and happiness. There's more to it. For real. Don't believe the limitations of this person, Pearly, and her little verse. And the fresh and the mental fits. And the whatever. They're kids. They're literally kids. And they're trying to tell you how the rest of the life is going to be when they don't know. They have no perspective. And they're asking the questions, but then they're saying as if they know everything. And let me tell you, I remember when I knew the whole of everything. And boy, I didn't know shit. Now I know what I would have considered the whole of everything, and I still don't know anything. Because I'm still learning and still growing and still finding out that there's doorways and pathways I haven't even seen yet. Because the universe and the world and life is so much more than the little cage to stand behind that's been built for us to fight over. Yeah, Pierre, I got you. I got you, buddy. It's time to go. Anyhow, don't forget, folks, like and subscribe. Pearlyverse 2, go ahead, like and subscribe. I wouldn't be talking to you if I hadn't found her show in the first place. We'll keep moving on. I swear to you, Dr. Quantum and Dr. Stephen Greer are up next. Because I got to get out. I got to get my mind fresh. I got to get my mind fresh and fit out of the actual, the nightmare that is this cesspool of dating BS that makes no sense in the world at large. It just works in the little society so they can, like, it's like, how do we fish in a barrel? Is what they're doing. But the problem is the barrel is only going to be the fish that you stock it with. So, of course, it's going to be the nonsense that you can run around in circles in the same maze with because it makes sense to you because that's the maze that you like and feel comfortable with. Stretch yourself. Be uncomfortable. Like and subscribe, folks. And don't forget, most importantly, look up because that's where the answer is.